Hello, and welcome to Grace in the Hardest Places, the podcast where we explore stories of faith, courage, and hope in life's most difficult moments. I'm your host, John.
Before we begin today's episode, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we're about to enter into a conversation that touches on some of the most sensitive and painful experiences a person can face. We'll be discussing sexual assault, trauma, and pregnancy in the context of violence.
If you're listening and find yourself needing to step away, please do so. Your well-being matters. This episode will be here when you're ready. Today, I'm joined by someone whose courage has deeply moved me. Sarah has agreed to share her story, a story that involves unimaginable pain, but also profound love, healing, and the transformative power of grace.
Over the past few months on this podcast, we've explored how faith intersects with real-life struggles. We've talked with people facing loss, addiction, doubt, and suffering. But today's conversation is perhaps one of the most challenging we've undertaken.
Sarah, thank you for being here and for trusting us with your story.
Thank you for having me, John. I'll be honest, I've been nervous about this for weeks. But I also feel like if sharing what I went through can help even one person feel less alone, then it's worth it.
That's incredibly generous of you. And I want our listeners to know that this conversation comes from a place of deep compassion and accompaniment. We're not here to debate abstract principles or engage in political arguments. We're here to listen to one woman's lived experience and how her faith sustained her through something no one should ever have to endure.
Sarah, if you're comfortable, could you take us back to where your story begins? What was your life like before everything changed?
Sure. I was 23, finishing my last year of graduate school in social work, actually. Which feels ironic now, given everything that happened. I was studying to help people in crisis, and I had no idea I was about to face my own. I was active in my campus ministry. I helped coordinate our weekly Bible studies, volunteered at a homeless shelter on weekends. I had a close group of friends, a small apartment I loved near campus, and honestly, life felt pretty good. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be.
That sounds like a really hopeful, purposeful time in your life.
It was. I remember feeling so grateful that year. I'd worked hard to get to that point. Scholarships, student loans, working part-time jobs at the campus library. But I was doing what I loved, studying something that mattered to me, and I could see my future taking shape. I was also dating someone, nothing serious, just getting to know each other. We'd go to coffee shops, study together, go to mass together sometimes. And I had this whole community around me. People who knew me, cared about me, supported me. Until one night in March when everything changed.
Take your time, Sarah.
I was at a party with friends, people I trusted, people from my program and from church. It was someone's birthday celebration. I had a couple of drinks, nothing excessive. I was always careful about that, especially because I was petite and didn't drink often. But at some point in the evening, I realized something was very wrong. I felt disoriented, confused, like my body wasn't responding the way it should. My vision was blurry, my words were slurring more than they should have been. I remember trying to find my friend Emily to tell her I needed to leave, but I couldn't find her. The room was spinning. I think someone might have put something in my drink. The details of that night are still fragmented for me. My therapist says that's normal with trauma and possible drugging. But I know I was sexually assaulted by someone I considered a friend. Someone I'd studied with for 2 years. Someone I'd sat next to at mass. Someone I trusted. I woke up the next morning alone in an unfamiliar bedroom, terrified, in physical pain, and knowing that something terrible had happened to me. My clothes were disheveled. I had bruises I didn't remember getting.
Sarah, I'm so deeply sorry. Thank you for trusting us with this. I know there are no adequate words.
Thank you. It took me weeks to even say the word rape out loud. I was in complete shock, dealing with shame I didn't deserve but couldn't shake, and trying to process trauma I didn't understand. I felt dirty, broken, violated in the deepest way. Like somehow I'd caused this. Maybe I shouldn't have been drinking. Maybe I should have been more careful. Maybe I'd sent the wrong signals. Maybe I'd been too friendly with him.
Those are very common responses to sexual assault. But I hope you know now that none of that was true. None of it was your fault.
Intellectually, I know that now. Emotionally, it took much longer. I confided in a couple of close friends who were incredibly supportive. They encouraged me to go to the police and to seek counseling, which I eventually did, though not as quickly as I should have. I filed a police report about 3 weeks later. The detective was kind, professional, but the process was re-traumatizing. Having to recount everything in clinical detail, to describe the assault to a stranger, knowing it would likely go nowhere because of the gaps in my memory and the lack of physical evidence after so much time had passed.
The justice system often fails survivors in these situations.
It does, and that compounds the trauma. This feeling that not only were you violated, but there is no accountability, no justice, no closure. He was never charged. He graduated that spring and moved to another state, and I was left to pick up the pieces. I started seeing a therapist, which helped. I was diagnosed with PTSD. I was having nightmares, panic attacks, flashbacks. I couldn't focus on my coursework. I was barely eating, barely sleeping. And then, about 6 weeks after the assault, I started feeling sick in a different way. Nauseous every morning, exhausted no matter how much I slept. Emotional in ways that felt extreme even for what I was going through. Part of me knew, but I was in such deep denial. I kept telling myself it was stress or a stomach bug or depression from the trauma or a side effect of the anti-anxiety medication I'd been prescribed. When I finally took a pregnancy test, actually, I took 3 of them over 2 days because I couldn't believe the results. And so those 2 lines appear, I just crumbled.
That must have felt completely overwhelming.
Overwhelming doesn't even begin to cover it. I was sitting on my bathroom floor at 2 in the morning, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe, hyperventilating, thinking, this cannot be happening. This cannot be real. God, please no. Please no. I felt like my entire future had just been stolen from me. Again. The assault had already taken so much. My sense of safety, my ability to trust people, my ability to focus on school, my peace of mind, my faith in God's protection. And now this. It felt like a cruel joke. Like the universe, or God, was punishing me for something I didn't do.
When you found out you were pregnant, what were your first thoughts? Where did your mind immediately go?
Honestly, my very first thought was, I can't do this. I absolutely cannot do this. It felt like the only way forward, the only way to make the nightmare stop, to reclaim some control over my body and my life, to not be reminded of the assault every single day was to have an abortion. That's where my mind went immediately. It seemed like the only option. Several friends suggested it right away too. They were trying to be supportive, loving, saying things like, you don't have to go through with it. No one would blame you. You have your whole life ahead of you. You didn't choose this. One friend even made calls to clinics for me, researched the procedures, offered to drive me and sit with me.
That must have created a lot of internal conflict, especially as someone who'd been actively practicing your faith.
It created enormous conflict. I grew up Catholic, not just casually, but deeply. My family went to Mass every Sunday without fail. I went to Catholic elementary school, Catholic high school, I'd been confirmed, I'd gone on mission trips to Guatemala and Appalachia. I understood the church's teaching on the sanctity of life from conception. I'd even volunteered at a pregnancy resource center during college. But in that moment, John, those teachings felt abstract, disconnected from the trauma I was living through. They felt like they were written by men who'd never experienced sexual violence, who'd never faced an unwanted pregnancy, who couldn't possibly understand what I was going through. I kept thinking, how can the church expect me to carry this pregnancy? How can they expect me to give birth to my rapist's child? Don't these circumstances make it different? Doesn't God understand what I'm going through? Isn't there an exception for this?
That's an incredibly human response to an inhuman situation. I think a lot of people listening might relate to that feeling. When doctrine and lived experience seem to collide, when faith feels impossibly hard.
Exactly. I was angry. So angry. Angry at God for letting this happen to me. Angry at the church for what felt like impossible, cruel expectations. Angry at myself for being in this position. Angry at my body for betraying me, for creating life from violence. I made an appointment at an abortion clinic for 2 weeks out. I told myself I just needed time to accept it, to make peace with the decision, to convince myself it was the right thing, the only thing to do. But those 2 weeks, John, those were the longest, darkest 2 weeks of my entire life.
What happened during that time? What were you experiencing?
I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake until 3, 4 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't control. I couldn't eat. I'd lost almost 10 pounds in those 2 weeks. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I withdrew from 2 of my classes. I kept researching compulsively, reading stories online at all hours. I read testimonies from women who'd had abortions after rape and felt enormous relief. Felt like they'd made the right choice for themselves. Felt like it helped them heal and move forward. And I read from women who deeply regretted it, who felt like they'd compounded one trauma with another, who struggled with grief and guilt for years afterward. I was looking for someone to tell me what to do, to make the decision for me, to take away the weight and the responsibility of it. I wanted a clear answer, a sign from God, something. I also, and this is hard to admit, I tried to pray, but I couldn't. I'd start to pray the rosary or try to go to Mass and just feel this wall of anger and resentment. I'd think, why should I pray to a God who let this happen to me? Where was God when I was being raped? Where is God now?
That's deeply honest. And I think God can handle our anger, our questions, our doubts.
My spiritual director told me that later too. She said that the Psalms are full of people yelling at God, questioning God, expressing raw emotion. But in that moment, I felt abandoned by God. One night, it was about 10 days before the appointment, I was at my apartment alone, and I just completely broke down. I'm talking full panic attack, hyperventilating, feeling like I was literally going to lose my mind. like I couldn't survive another minute of this. I called my mom. I hadn't told her anything up to that point. Not about the assault, not about the pregnancy, nothing. I'd been trying to protect her, or maybe I was just too ashamed to tell her that her daughter had been raped and was pregnant. But that night, I called her at midnight and just said, "Mom, I need you. Something terrible happened and I need you right now."
How did she respond?
She didn't hesitate for even a second. She said, "I'm getting in the car right now. I'll be there in 3 hours. Stay on the phone with me if you need to." And she drove through the night to get to me. When she arrived at my apartment at 3 in the morning, she didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. She just came in, sat down next to me on the floor where I was still sitting, and held me while I cried. And I told her everything: the assault, the pregnancy, the appointment I'd made, the decision I thought I'd already made. All of it. She cried with me. My mom, who's usually so strong and composed, just wept with me. And then, after we'd both cried for a while, she said something I'll never ever forget. She said, "Sarah, whatever you decide, I will love you. You are my daughter, and nothing will ever change that. But before you make this decision, I want you to consider one thing. This baby is not your rapist. This baby is yours. This baby is part of you, part of our family."
Wow, that's incredibly powerful.
It shifted everything for me. Up until that moment, I'd been thinking of the pregnancy as an extension of the assault, as something violent that was happening to me, something that represented my attacker, something that would keep me trapped in that trauma forever. But my mom helped me see that this was a separate person, a person who was innocent, who had done nothing wrong, who hadn't chosen to be conceived this way any more than I'd chosen to be raped. This baby was half me, carried my DNA, my family's heritage, my genes. And she said something else that really struck me. She said, "If you have an abortion, Sarah, that's your choice. But I don't want you to do it out of anger at him, or out of fear, or out of trauma. I want you to make this decision from a place of clarity and peace, whatever that decision is." And I realized I wasn't there yet. I wasn't making the decision from clarity. I was making it from panic and pain.
Did that realization make the path forward clearer?
Not clearer, but different. I cancelled the appointment that night. Not because I'd decided to keep the baby, but because I wasn't ready to make an irreversible decision from a place of crisis. I started going to therapy more regularly, twice a week, including sessions with a Catholic counselor who specialized in trauma and sexual assault. She was incredible. She never judged me, never made me feel guilty, never quoted doctrine at me. She helped me understand that keeping the baby didn't mean minimizing what happened to me. It didn't mean I had to forgive and forget, or pretend the assault wasn't devastating, or that I was somehow okay with it. She helped me see that I could hold two truths at once. What happened to me was evil and wrong and caused profound suffering. This child's life had inherent dignity and worth.
That's a really important distinction, that choosing life doesn't negate the trauma or the injustice of what you suffered. These aren't mutually exclusive truths.
Exactly. And I also learned something important about the church's teaching. It's not about punishment or making victims suffer more or some cruel moral test. It's rooted in the belief that every human life, from the moment of conception, has value and dignity, regardless of how that life began. That the circumstances of someone's conception don't determine their worth as a person. That teaching challenged me deeply, but ultimately, it also freed me in a strange way.
How so?
Because it meant that my baby's worth wasn't dependent on my circumstances or my feelings or my ability to cope. Even when I felt broken and incapable, even when I was drowning in trauma and could barely function, this life had value. That took some of the pressure off me to feel a certain way. I didn't have to be excited or happy or even okay. I didn't have to have it all figured out. I just had to keep putting one foot in front of the other and trust that I wasn't alone in this.
Did you end up keeping the pregnancy?
I did. I made the decision about a week after that conversation with my mom. And I won't lie, the pregnancy was incredibly hard. Physically, I was sick constantly. Morning sickness that lasted all day, fatigue that was crushing, complications that required close monitoring. Emotionally, there were days I resented the pregnancy, days I grieved the life I thought I'd have, days I was angry all over again. I had to take a medical leave from school. I moved back home with my parents, which at 23 felt like a failure, even though I knew it was the right decision. But I also had support. My mom was there every day. My therapist helped me process the complex emotions. A few close friends stuck by me. Not many, but the ones who mattered. And I found support from an unexpected place, a Catholic pregnancy resource center. They provided practical help, prenatal vitamins, maternity clothes, baby supplies, but also emotional and spiritual support without judgment.
How did your faith evolve during the pregnancy itself?
It was complicated and messy. I was angry at God for a long time. I'd go to Mass with my mom and just sit there, numb, unable to pray, unable to sing, just going through the motions. But I kept going. And slowly, very, very slowly, I started to feel God's presence again. Not in some dramatic way, but in small moments. In the people who showed up for me. In moments of unexpected peace. In the quiet of prayer when I could finally pray again. I also found deep comfort in Mary. The idea that she said yes to an unexpected pregnancy, to something she didn't fully understand, something that would bring her immense suffering. Obviously, very different circumstances than mine, but still a yes that required tremendous trust and courage. I there praying the rosary again, slowly, and I found myself relating to Mary's journey in ways I never had before.
When your daughter was born, what was that experience like?
Terrifying and beautiful at the same time. I was in labor for 18 hours. It was long and painful and difficult. And during those hours, I remember thinking, I don't know if I can love this baby. I don't know if I can look at her and not see him. What if I can't bond with her? What if I've made a terrible mistake? But then, when they placed her on my chest, and your psalm for the first was those our home, John, she my mom's chin, my grandmother's eyes. She was her own person. Beautiful, perfect, innocent. And I felt this overwhelming surge of love that I didn't know I was capable of feeling, especially after everything I'd been through. I non-versed Grace, because that's what she was. Grace in the midst of darkness, hope in the midst of despair, beauty from ashes.
That's beautiful, Sarah. What would you say to someone listening right now who might be in a similar situation?
First, I would say that what happened to you is not your fault. You didn't deserve it, you didn't cause it, and your pain is valid and real. If you are pregnant as a result of rape or sexual assault, your feelings, whatever they are valid too. Second, I'd say that you don't have to make this decision alone or under pressure. Reach out to people who will support you without pushing their own agenda. Find a good trauma-informed counselor. If you are Catholic or Christian, talk to a priest or spiritual director who understands trauma, not someone who's going to shame you or quote Bible verses at you. And third, and this is just my experience, I can't speak for everyone. I'd say that choosing life doesn't mean you are minimizing your suffering or letting your attacker win or denying justice. For me, it meant reclaiming my power in a different way. It meant saying that violence doesn't get the last word, that love is stronger than evil, that beauty can come from the darkest places. But whatever you decide, you deserve compassion, support, and healing. You deserve to be treated with dignity and respect.
Sarah, thank you so much for your courage, both in living this story and in sharing it with us today. I know this wasn't easy, and I'm deeply grateful.
Thank you for creating a space where these stories can be told, John. I hope it helps someone.
If you've experienced sexual assault, you don't have to walk through this alone. You deserve support, compassion, and healing. Thank you for listening to Grace in the Hardest Places. If this episode touched you or might help someone you know, please consider sharing it. Until next time, may you find courage in your struggles and hope in the journey.